Hi everyone, welcome to our journey through Mark's Gospel. We've got to chapter 3. The chapter begins with another Sabbath controversy, this time about whether or not Jesus should heal a man with a shriveled hand. Of course he does, invoking the outrage of the religious leaders who were there. But what we see in this incident is where their problem lies. It's a problem with their hearts. You see Jesus in Verse 5 is distressed at their stubborn hearts. Because of their hearts, they have come to Jesus with their minds made up and looking to accuse him. Now this tells us something very important. We might think that we and others are entirely objective whenever it comes to weighing up the evidence about Jesus. But we're not like that naturally. The Bible tells us that our hearts are deceitful, that we may well find that they lead us in the wrong direction, not wanting to believe in Jesus, even though the evidence says we should, for example. Jesus then appoints his apostles, 12 from among the wider disciple band, with particular ministry responsibilities, later with witness responsibilities. But do you notice that one of the reasons that he appoints them is so that they would be with him? Now that speaks powerfully of Jesus' humanity. He seeks out human companionship. It also, of course, tells us that time with Jesus is transforming because we know that these people's lives are changed remarkably. The last section of the Gospel of that chapter is interesting. It is bookended by a story about Jesus' family. They think he's lost the plot and they want him to come home. But in the middle of that account, we see some high-level religious leaders from Jerusalem have come and they accuse Jesus of being satanically inspired. Now there's so much to take note of here. First of all, we see that they're not questioning his power. There's no doubt that Jesus is doing the things that he is doing, but they say that the power comes from the devil rather than from God. But we also see that Jesus is very realistic about spiritual realities and the battle that we're actually all in. He says that his work is like taking possessions from a strong man, implying that we are those who are in some way under Satan's influence before we are, as it were, carried off by Jesus. And we also see a dreadful spiritual danger that Jesus speaks of, that of blaspheming the Holy Spirit. And that's been something that's caused a lot of discussion down through the years. But at its heart, it means a stubborn resistance to Jesus, just like the religious leaders here were showing, which led them to treat Jesus with contempt and as evil rather than as good. So we're learning here that how we think of Jesus really, really matters. There are spiritual forces at play in our lives, and the reality of that often passes us by. Well, when Jesus' family gets word to him to come home, Jesus says something very challenging. He is building a new family. Whoever does God's will is his brother and sister and mother, as he says here in verse 35. Now that's a family that we should want to belong to. And this incident shows us that Jesus divides people. We have seen and will see right through the Gospel that fact. And here indeed we see some options as to how we might think of Jesus. We might think that he was mad, just like his family did. They thought he'd lost his mind. But of course, it's hard to say that he was deluded whenever we read these accounts because it's clear that he knows exactly what he's doing. There's a tremendous consistency with him. We might say, on the other hand, that he was bad. The religious leaders thought that. They thought he was satanically inspired, but maybe others would think that he was a charlatan, deliberately pulling the wool over people's eyes, encouraging them to believe in him, but without cause. But again, that doesn't match what we see. So if he's not mad or bad, then we're left with the conclusion that Mark clearly wants us to come to. And that is that he is Lord. He is to be submitted to and trusted in and followed. And that's how we become part of this new family that he is building. This is what we find, of course, as we read this gospel. It's not just that we're reading it, it's also reading us. It's asking us searching questions about what we think about Jesus and what we're going to do about that. Is he mad or bad or Lord? It's sort of uncomfortable. It's going to get more uncomfortable and more wonderful. So, read chapter 4 I'll see you tomorrow.